Donald Trump is dragging down the Republican Party in these primaries and races. That is clear. New polling shows him at an all-time low of 33% approval. And the big, tough number for Republicans is that 64% disapproval, a strong negative. And this is a party that has tied itself to Trump more than any other modern president. We all know about the loyalty, the fear of Trump, the inability to confront him, which is becoming a drag in these midterms. Then you have the economy. Voters now trust Democrats over Republicans by about 7 points. And it's no outlier. A 6-point edge there on the Financial Times poll. Or if you check Fox News, right, margin of error, whatever you think about Fox's polling operation, they find Republicans down 9, Dems up 9, however you say it, it's a spread. Gas and oil is up. We're 6 months into a war that Donald Trump famously and falsely promised would have been long over by now. Many losing patience, including some Republicans who were speaking in Florida on the way to those primary voting opportunities I mentioned. This was today.
What do you make of this war? Is it benefiting your life at all?
Absolutely ridiculous we're in there in the first place.
It's my tax dollars, but I ain't got no choice. It's got to be funding this war that I didn't even choose.
Are you benefiting from this war?
No. Who's benefiting from it? Look at fuel prices. Hegseth don't have an idea what he's doing.
When you think of this war, what's the one word that comes to your mind?
Absolutely unnecessary.
Is the war helping your life at all?
No.
Why no?
Everything is too expensive.
Does this war feel America first?
No.
People know what's going on. Trump, meanwhile, enriching himself and then fixating on those vanity projects we keep hearing about. He was posting today about how work on the White House columns, he says, has gone beautifully. This is his focus. One of the things about his incessant use of social media, which many have said raise questions about why he's up so late, his mental acuity and other things. But it also does show where his head is at. If any Republican is running for Congress claiming, well, they're working on these issues, the prices are ending the war, it often doesn't seem to be the case out of the president's own mouth. I want to bring in someone that we rely on, especially to make sense of all these economic indicators, Nobel Prize winning economist. Paul Krugman, author of the Paul Krugman Substack, longtime writer and author. Welcome back.
Hi there.
When you see both the gas prices and some of these wider indicators, it looks like the Trump economy is not working great. What is sort of the signal to noise that you think we should focus on to understand where we are at?
I mean, this is not, the poetic justice, if it were a complete catastrophe economy, this is not the 2008 financial crisis. This is not the stagflation of the 70s, but it is not great. It is, job growth is way, way down. Inflation is running persistently hot. And of course, the things that people can see, gas prices, diesel prices are even worse, and interest rates. Try to, get a mortgage, try to finance a car loan. This is not a good economy. And, the contrast with what Trump promised, cut energy prices in half, he would stop grocery price inflation on day one, is immense. And the thing is, we had some troubles in 2022 under Biden, but those were arguably not his fault. I mean, they weren't his fault. And this is absolutely, totally, this is one man did this.
You mentioned loans. When you look at how a lot of folks who struggle to make ends meet, and the gas prices really had people making trade-offs this summer between, canceling maybe one weekend trip with the kids or camping or whatnot. We've seen what looks like a migration of credit card debt. ABC has this headline about that rising over 1.26 trillion, actually gets near an all-time record. How do you read that? What does that mean?
I think what this is telling us is that a lot of people are under stress. We look at the average and we find that wages have lagged prices, but only by a little bit, according to the official numbers. But there's a lot of variation in that. And when you have things doing when the economy is as relatively weak as it is now, when inflation is running hot and it's running much hotter for some things than others, there's a lot of people who are definitely hurting. So, we talk a lot about vibe-cession. Is this just bad feelings? And no, it's not. This is really, this is not an economy that is delivering. And again, the contrast with what people were promised has got to be hitting a lot of people hard.
Yeah, you keep mentioning that, Paul, and I think it's pretty striking because, when we looked at the exit polls in 24, which can be a bit more reliable than all of these early polls, we saw voters were laser focused on affordability and prices, as you mentioned. Trump ran on it, didn't do anything about it. Mamdani in New York ran on affordability as well, and he's getting criticized for how much he's trying to do about it. But I don't even think his critics would say he's not working on the things that he promised, whether that's different tax structures, other ways to meet people's needs in New York. I want to show GDP growth also slowing. So when you look at the big macro picture, you have that, and you also you see that slowing there, and then you have high U.S. debt. You've written before about how Republicans seem to talk about it when they're not in office. So there's no easy, overnight solution there. But you have $40 trillion in debt and a slowing GDP. What do you see there?
Okay. Interest rates are up. Probably there's a little bit, though probably not mostly, that the markets are starting to get concerned about the debt, but the deficit, which is the deficit is the amount that you add to debt each year. The deficit is really, really high. This is not the biggest deficit we've ever seen as a share of GDP, but it is pretty much the biggest deficit we've had when there isn't an emergency. We had a big deficit during COVID. Well, a lot of aid had to be given. We had a big deficit after the financial crisis 15 years ago. But to have a 6% of GDP budget deficit when, I was going to say no war. There is a war, but it's not even by the scale of World War II, it's not an enormously expensive war. When there's no national emergency, when the economy is sluggish, but not in a recession. That's crazy. And if you go and start to dig into that, you ask, why is the deficit so big? The answer is basically tax cuts. Between the various, Trump tax cuts, right, most recently, the big, beautiful bill, the ones he did in 2017, and some legacy still from W. Bush's tax cuts. If we hadn't had those tax cuts, we'd be fine in fiscal terms. So what drives me crazy, by the way, when you show the polling. So, okay, we now have, by a 7-point margin, Americans think Democrats are better on the economy. Why is that only 7 points? And why was it ever the other way around? If we go off the long history, we have a repeated cycle here where Republicans blow up the deficit, blow up the debt, act irresponsibly. Then a Democrat comes in and kind of fixes the mess. And then they do it again. And it's a tremendous, I guess there's still a public belief that billionaires must know something about economic management because that's the only way I can make sense of this.
Well, I think that's partly right. When you think about what the party's sort of macro reputation is, the GOP has been more tied to bankers and the 1% and the prosperity. And so at least when times are good, that's an association. But as you say, whether that means that's delivered out to anyone else, I think is a big question. I'm curious where you stand on what is, at least in the public realm, an increasing skepticism of the way that our financial system is backing the AI and big tech in a rush. We've been reporting more on that. And while there may be great advances here over the long term that can help people if done responsibly, the rush, the piling on of the debt, and even some of the deregulation on the Trump side, rather than trying to get control of this, has a lot of financial questions. I'd love for you to tackle that. And then I'll mention, and our viewers, I think, know, compared to, say, 3 or 4 years ago where this was all hypothetical, kind of, hey, someday it'll be like a sci-fi movie or the Jetsons. Now people are seeing these data centers in their community. They're seeing the addiction issues in social media and ChatGPT and other things. And there's a lot more political grassroots skepticism. I give you the floor on all of that.
Yeah. So, what we're calling AI it's amazing. I still remember when it was completely, being able to hold what felt like a plain English conversation with a computer. That was unthinkable 6-7 years ago. And there it is. And it does have its uses. But first of all, is it an epical, transformational technology? verdict is still very much out on that. You can see, actually, you see very little of it in the kind of productivity numbers. Now, maybe there's more to come, but even if it is, even if it does accelerate growth, that doesn't mean that these companies are going to get back all the money they're plowing in. So that's and there's particularly one of the things you hear. It sounds mysterious, but what they call circular financing, which is that, and the way I think about it, it's kind of as if it's the California gold rush, and the only people really making money are not the people searching for gold, but the saloon keepers and the brothel operators who are lending the prospectors the money with which to spend at their establishment. So is this a real business? And there's still a lot of that about the whole AI boom.